Hi everyone, welcome back to Jungle Dragons. Today we're going to do part 2 of my feeder insect review series. Today we're talking about Dubia roaches. For starters, this is my only colony right now. I used to have 2 of these, and just a few days ago I consolidated them down into 1 because, well, a lot of the cardboard needed to be replaced. For 1, for 2, there was a lot of mold from the food that I'd thrown in there, and it was getting dirty, really dirty. And 3, this is probably a rare issue for some people, but I had some kind of a spider kind of come in and make their homes in here, and they were reproducing quite well because they were living primarily off of the buffalo beetles. That's what was primarily getting caught in their webs. And they didn't seem to really scare or be feeding too much off of the dubias, but they were eating some baby dubias. So that's the other thing is I killed all of those spiders. So if you see any spiders in your dubia bin, make sure and take them out, guys, because they will definitely ruin your day. All right, so let's go ahead and get into why dubias are great feeder insects for reptiles, and particularly for chameleons. And if you didn't see my part 1 on crickets, I have a 12-point review system for my feeder insects. All 12 points are things I rate from 0 to 5, depending on how good or bad the insect is. I really don't give zeros. Maybe I have. No, I haven't. I haven't given any zeros. So it's really 1 to 5. So minimum score of 12, maximum of 60. And well, for starters, guys, dubias get pretty big. So I'm going to show you some footage of my hive. I've only got probably, I don't know, maybe like 50 adult dubia in here, which seems crazy because I know most people have bigger hives, and you know, they have a lot more, and they're able to reproduce fast enough that they can feed them and sell them off. I'm really kind of just going for something small, manageable, and light that I can use just for my collection. So, you know, you are not required to breed a crap ton of these guys. They reproduce at a pretty predictable rate, and they reproduce faster in warmer climates, or if you give them some kind of a heat pad below or heat light above, one way or another. But I actually keep a lid on my dubia, so I'm going to show you. I've got this lid with all these black holes. Hopefully you can see them. They're all in the middle, and then around the side of my hive I've got a bunch of holes all around the sides. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so I've shown you the basics of what my little setup it looks like, and I use it only for my collection of, you know, 8 to 30 chameleons. And I gotta say, I really love these feeders. I actually feel bad almost when I feed them off. When I first got these guys, I thought they were really gross. I didn't want to have to ever get them, but you know, as I got accustomed to super worms and well, it went crickets, super worms, dubia, and from dubia I've gone to a lot of other insect feeders that we're gonna get into in next episodes here. But let's go ahead and go into my 12 category list of why dubias are awesome and why you should probably have some and maybe even breed some yourself. Okay, so for the first category, price, I do give these guys a 1. Dubias are some of the most expensive roaches you can buy. They're more expensive than red runners. They're more expensive than, I think they're tied with lobster roaches, but most other roaches are more expensive. But these ones are like a staple, and they're pretty expensive. They're more expensive than some. So I do give them a 1. They're pretty expensive. For example, an adult roach goes from anywhere, probably a minimum of about 75 cents all the way up to about $2, depending on who you're buying from. So there's a huge, 75 cents to $2 per single insect is a huge range, but I have seen some people selling them for pretty darn close to $2 each, which I thought was ridiculous because, again, if you guys do hunt around, you'll find them for about 75 a pop per adult, which is still pretty darn expensive because if you just want, like, I don't know, a starter colony with maybe 15 adults, you know, that's close to $20 because they're gonna force you to get some younger dubias as well, because you can't start a colony with just adults. You have to have some other ones that are going to grow into adulthood, because, well, it's just going to mean your adults die off, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of babies, and it's going to take a long time for them to get to adulthood, lay eggs, and if you feed off too many of them, your hive will actually die before it gets started. So anyways, I give them a 1 for price. They're pretty darn expensive. Next, size. I give them a perfect 5. These guys get big. I mean, take a look at some of this footage of me just handling some of these guys. They are kind of gross, but I mean, they're really pretty docile. They don't move around too quickly. They're not too scary, and they don't climb smooth surfaces, and they can't climb upside down, and best of all, the males that have the wings, they cannot actually fly. They can kind of flutter and soften an impact if you drop them, but they cannot fly. They cannot glide. They can only kind of flutter down to the ground. So size, they get a perfect 5. They get pretty darn big, and your biggest male chameleons will eat adults. Your biggest female chameleons will eat adults, but besides that, smaller chameleons will be intimidated by these guys, and they will not eat adults. Of course, I almost never feed off my adults unless it's an old male, and I can tell it's old because its wings kind of look dilapidated and shriveled or broken, something like that. Okay, nutrition. They get a perfect 5 as well. They're highly nutritious, a lot of protein, right up there with crickets. And I will take a moment now to go into the details of their nutrition. Alright, so what we see here, guys, is the Dubia roaches in the 4th place, and they have a little less moisture than crickets, but that's okay because they make up for it in big ways with the calcium to phosphorus ratio. As I've discussed in the first video, what you really want for reptiles is about a 2-to-1 ratio, and this is a 1-to-3 ratio, so a little closer to the goal. Which makes them really great for reptiles. So they're expensive feeders, as I said in the beginning of this video, but they kind of make up for it. As you can see, the rest of the nutrition here is almost exactly tied with crickets. So they're top of the line nutritionally, low in fat, high protein, really good fiber, by the way. 3% fiber is better than most of these other feeders, so they're really phenomenal. Back to the video. Alright, so as you can see, they're pretty nutritious. They're really a good staple insect to have for your chameleons or reptiles. And the next category after nutrition is reproduction speed. I give them a 3. They are not perfect per se. They lay basically like eggs that hatch very quickly after they are laid. You can actually find some females that I guess are, I'm not sure how it works, but some females actually lay live. Like the dubias are born right after they're laid. But technically they can be laid in kind of like an ooth, like an egg sac type dealio. But yeah, they're not perfect. They're not very fast. They reproduce much faster when it's warmer. So keep them around 75 degrees to 80 or even 85, but no higher than that. Otherwise, they'll actually die out just from being too hot, like chronically hot. That will hurt their health. So I give them a 3 for reproduction speed. Ease of care, I give them a 4. Not a perfect 5, because you do have to watch. The number one thing you have to watch for is mold and bacteria that will really impede their ability to thrive, and it grows really readily in any kind of dubia nest hive type thing that's like this. They do like it dark, so having the right ventilation is kind of tricky. Something I would recommend is probably actually cutting out a section of the side and putting a screen in to let even more airflow sorry, what did I just say? Even more airflow through. Yeah, okay, I did say that right. All right, but yeah, more airflow means less mold and bacteria spreading. It helps it spread but not grow faster because it needs moisture, and you want to wick that moisture away. So any kind of Sorry guys, my camera pooped out in the middle of that, but just to cover the ease of care, basically you need some ventilation for these guys, even though they like dark, tiny, cramped places. You need some ventilation, otherwise you're gonna have a ton of mold, and the mold and bacteria, surprisingly, it really won't kill these guys, but it will stop them from being able to have viable offspring. Their offspring will not hatch, or it'll die and it's young, basically. So you do have to take care of that. All right, moving on. Food needs. Food needs, I give them a 4. That's because they eat almost anything, like really. They're not super picky, but there are some things that they will not eat. And most importantly, if you want to most easily take care of them, like really easily, basically you're gonna have to end up buying like roach chow. I'll show you how, real quick, I'll show you a bag of mine, which is right behind the camera actually. Here's a bag of my roach chow, which I had to rebag because actually some mice ate a hole in my other bag and they ate like a little bit of it. I have since gotten rid of those mice. But anyways, you're going to have to buy roach chow, and it's fairly cheap. But, you know, I am optimizing for absolute, like, ease of care, for good care. So basically what I do is I give them water crystals, roach chow, and 1 or 2 vegetables. Carrots and cucumbers are my favorite right now. They're just super cheap and easy. Other things I try might be, like, cauliflower. They don't really like anything else. I've tried other things, broccoli. I've tried zucchini. They don't like zucchini nearly as much as cucumber because really what they want is that water, I think. But the most interesting thing to note, if you are having low reproduction and you want to bring up the reproduction rates without having to raise the temps, feed them oranges. They love citrus, but not anything too acidic like lemons or limes. So oranges are huge as well. So they like fruits and vegetables. All right, moving on. So they got a 4 on that. Ickiness, yeah, I give them a 2. They're not the worst. They're not like Madagascar hissing cockroaches, but they are big. They are pretty gross. I don't really like handling them all that much, but they don't move very much either, so it's not scary at all. You get used to them pretty quick. They're pretty docile again, and they don't move too quick, so it's not too gross per se. So I don't give them a 1, but they are pretty icky. So you know, you're gonna have issues with family, friends, and yada yada if you're needing help from them. Whenever I go out of town, I literally just feed my Dubia a whole bunch, and I tell whoever's taking care of them to don't worry about that box. Don't even look in it. They'll be fine. You just feed off the crickets or the superworms, whatever you're more comfortable with. So that's what I usually do when people are taking care of my chameleons for me. All right, next one is escapability. I give them a 5 because although they can escape, they really just end up sticking around wherever they're most comfortable. So they like these tight spaces, these cardboards. I also really think they like being inside of tubes that have other tubes inside them that are folded up, and I'll show you in this footage here. They really like that. Literally some of these tubes weigh quite a bit because it is just chocked full of Dubia roaches, and they like that even more than being in the cardboard bins. So I've absent-mindedly forgotten to put the lid back on one of these things before, and literally had an entire day of this with no lid. And when I got back and realized my mistake and freaked out about it, I looked around the area, and I didn't find any, in fact. And they appeared to all still be in their bin. So even if they can escape, sometimes they just won't. Also, they cannot climb smooth surfaces. You don't need any special tape or glass or anything like that. Like, they cannot climb walls, period. They also cannot fly. The males with the wings, they can't fly at all. They can only flutter. They can kind of flutter down to the ground to break their fall, but they can't even glide. So they really can't get away from you very well. So they get a perfect 5. Infestability, they get a 4 because in colder climates, they will die. They just cannot reproduce in a house well enough, but they will infest in like somewhere like Florida. So I put a little asterisk next to that 4 because that could be as low as a 1, as in they could be highly infestive if you live in a climate where they will thrive. Keep in mind, these are like tropical type roaches here. So yeah, up in the colder climates in the north, they get a 4. So that one really depends on where you live. All right, upkeep. I give them a 4 as well because they're pretty easy to take care of, and they only need to be cleaned once a year. And they need to be cleaned because of bacteria and mold, not because of their frass. Their frass is actually fine. It's dry. It's doesn't smell. It's fine basically. It's also very good fertilizer, so I always dump that into my compost bin to mix into the soil and, you know, be future garden soil for me. Yeah. Lastly, we got smell. I give them a perfect 5 because at this distance right here, I can literally smell the cucumbers that I put in there. And besides that, I can't smell anything else. So they hardly smell at all, guys. They're amazing. Now, if you put your face in there, you're going to smell them. But really, no one's going to smell them if there's a lid on this. So, perfect 5. I love it. It's really convenient. And then we got our last one, which is called movement speed. Movement speed, I give them a 2, not a 1, because they're not like hornworms that hardly move, or stick bugs that don't move, basically. But they do stop moving quickly if you put them in a feeder cup. So if you put a big one or any size one in a chameleon enclosure or with any kind of reptile, you probably want to put it right in front of the reptile or your animal. If you've got a shallow, you know, like a bottom dweller, like a desert lizard or something, you could put it in one of those feeder cups as long as the lizard sees it. But what Dubia often do is simply like sandwich or like put their body on the wall of a feeder cup in a way that's kind of like how a crustacean fits on a rock, and it's just like their outer shell just kind of like covers their legs, and so it just looks like nothing. And so chameleons just don't go for them a lot of the time because they just kind of blend in. They just, you know, they don't look like a meal. They don't move enough, so they get a 2. And that's basically all of them, guys. And that covers it, guys. That is my 12 categories. And out of all 12 categories, if you add it all up, they get a 45, which is actually very high. It actually beats crickets by 3 points, which is pretty big because, you know, none of these insects are going to get a perfect 60, guys. It's impossible to have a perfect insect. It's impossible. So I'm giving very realistic scores here. And I'm not going to tell you which insect gets a 50, but a 50 is actually the highest score I have given out of any of these things so far. So getting a 45 is pretty darn good. So anyways, guys, if you enjoy this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I'm not selling anything at this time. I'm not asking for you to join my Patreon or something or anything like that just yet. For now, I just want to basically help everyone with husbandry because chameleons, you know, are going to get harder to get over the coming years until CITES reopen some countries in Africa like Madagascar, Cameroon, etc. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and good luck taking care of your animals and your feeders. Thanks for watching.